about nature, but also I did a whole series of songs about the earth, like from different genres. So, and April. But yeah, like I said, y'all keep designing. But my study group, now, like I said, I've taught just about every group of students you can imagine at Gaffney High School, and my outdoor lessons have included all of them. And my dissertation study last spring, these were students that came from two different classes. One of them was the standard English 3CP, and the other one was English 1 repeaters. They were students that were like 11th and 12th grade who had not passed English 1 yet. And so these were students who had been pathologized because they had not met the traditional standards that were expected of them. But these were highly creative students, and their records at school did not reflect their abilities. And I really think it was because of what was expected of them at school just did not connect with their real lives. And there was a few of them that had just come back from the alternative school, several of them that had failed previous classes. But like I said, I learned so much about how our system doesn't do these kids a solid. Excuse my retro phrasing, but they were involved in very creative activities outside of school, but they did not view themselves as good writers. They're like, oh, I can't write, and they would tell me why they couldn't meet word limits, or they couldn't fit the format, is what it was. But they designed anime, and they Ethan had his own like online car parts business, like on social media. He was wheeling and dealing car parts, and Maddie was just incredible. She had created these characters visually in her art that had characters and names and all this kind of stuff. So these are creative students. There's no reason they should not consider themselves as creators or writers. And y'all, one of my biggest surprises was when I thought one of my lessons was on fairies, leprechauns, and trolls. And I read a little picture book and I said, I want you to go find a place where you think a fairy may live. But before I even got to the artifact prompt, I had one of the boys who had just come back from the alternative school said, can we fight dragons? I said, I absolutely want you to fight dragons. They embraced the imaginative aspect of it far more than I thought. They were not too cool to find a place where fairies, leprechauns, and trolls lived. And they wrote about it and had ridiculous imagery. I was so proud of them. And that was a major lesson for me of how we're doing them a disservice by not including more imaginative literature and more chances for them to be imaginative, because they embraced it totally. And the mentor text had more influence than I thought. I tried to make sure I had a diverse set. We did 9 lessons, and I tried to make sure they were diverse genres, diverse time periods, diverse authors, diverse situations, diverse perspectives toward the natural world. And I was looking to see how they responded, and they responded strongly, but it was almost all at a self-reflective level. It wasn't necessarily what they identified with a particular character or anything. It was about some kind of internal moral lesson or observation they were making. And I was like, oh, yeah, we don't see this with, y'all, I'm not hating on informational text, but I kind of am. But we just don't see that kind of emotional response to it. So what happened was, I wrote a grant to get these camping chairs so we could take them outside and sit in the camping chairs. That was from the electric co-op, Broad River Electric Co-op, but I think all the electric co-ops have grants. They're called Bright Ideas grants, the electric co-ops do. And so I wrote a grant and got the camping chairs for it. But what I found was that students who hadn't written before began to write during the outdoor lessons. Not all of them right away. Like Lance, it took him about halfway, but by the end he wrote an imaginative story about a bear attack. I mean, I'm very proud of it. Ariel embraced the multimodal aspect. Now, this was before this new cell phone situation. I let them take their cell phones out. I let them take pictures and film themselves. And she did all sorts of things with her phone. She did like vlogs. She did videos. She embraced it totally. But their writing was always tied to an outdoor experience with the artifact. It always came from that. And like I said, they embraced the imaginative tasks, and I saw writing skills that they had not exhibited indoors, like storytelling. I'm gonna tell you about Trey. Trey was just, he was one of those kids who avoided writing. He did enough in class to pass it. Well, he had failed before, but at this point he had learned how to do enough to get in. But when he told the story about being chased with the bug, it was amazing storytelling skills. He had everybody in the class eating out of the palm of his hand. We didn't know he had those storytelling skills until he had the chance to tell it verbally. And so we saw skills that we wouldn't have seen if we were only doing TDA. Okay, so after you do the physical activity part of it, like I said, that look, after we had the sticky notes on, I would ask them to draw conclusions. What do we learn about words? What do we learn about why we need words and that kind of stuff? Make the valuable part of it. And we'd have some notes for this. This is the point of this, because inevitably I'll have some student like, I don't understand what this has to do. Well, here's why. We're learning about the value of words, and you're gonna remember this because you wrote it on a rock. All right. And then like I said, we did the rock garden, and we shared our words, and then they wrote about what word they chose and why they chose it. But there's lots of different ways you can do this. You can, like if you've got a small group, everybody can share. If you have a large group like this, you can do it in groups. Or you can place the rock garden and people draw conclusions based on looking at the whole rock garden. This is this is Ariel with the caterpillar she had on the stick. Okay. So what we would do next, you'll see on that last part, is write whatever you want to, but you really, whatever conclusion. I always left it completely open at this point. Why you chose the word, what you learned from your classmates and their words. This provides safety for a couple of reasons. One, I'm not asking that it's a self-reflective activity, but it's not one of those things where right about a time you were scared. And so they either have to come up with a fake story or a real superficial story about the roller coaster, because they don't want to tell us the horrifying story of when their stepdaddy beat up their mama or something, So we know that that's not producing authentic writing. But everybody saw what we did with the rocks, and so they're not afraid to write about that because they've all experienced it together. We can also do, like I said, some inductive reasoning. What do the words have in common? What big do you notice? What big differences do you notice? What new words did you learn? And so you see there's lots of different options for what they can write about. So if they're into the touchy-feely stuff, they can go with what they do. Otherwise, they can just write about what they noticed if they're not to that point yet. And that's what happened with Lance. At first, he wouldn't write at all. Then he would sort of just kind of start listing stuff. And then by the end, he was writing stories about bear attacks. Why did you decorate the way you did? How could you use any of these words? And I wrote this up here because, like I said, I didn't limit the way they were